Outside the box of religious obligation lies a road less travelled, into the heart of the Father's affection. Slinging freedom all over the place, this is the God Journey.
I'm Brad Cummings.
And I'm Wayne Jacobsen.
And this is the God Journey.
And we're back again and trying to get something in before a nurse shows up because Sarah's recovering from surgery here at the old homestead. And
she got a new hip.
I'm nurse in chief, so...
You are nurse in chief.
I'm nurse, caregiver, chief cook, and bottle washer. I'm the whole thing right now. So, yeah.
How's Wayne holding up?
Doing fine. I mean, it's part of being married and part of this season in your life. It's great to have a partner who can. I mean, she did it for me when I had heart surgery, and now tables are turned, and I'm helping her in every way she needs to be helped until she gets back on her feet.
But the procedure went well?
Procedure went very well. Made the mistake of looking at a video online of what they actually do. Can't get that out of my head.
Was that kind of scary?
Hip replacement. Just, oh my gosh.
That's a lot.
All the metal tools involved in ripping this bone, drilling this, rotating that bone out of the socket and cleaning the socket and then cutting the bone. And I mean, it's just...
Wow. So you now have the bionic woman.
I have a bionic woman, but, you know, she's at that place. And I remember the same thing after heart surgery. You know, you're a few days out, you're tired of hurting.
Right.
And you're not better yet, and you're not getting better yet. You're just existing. And
okay.
I remember kind of where Sarah is right now, just kind of crashing, just kind of like, crud, this is going to go on forever. And it won't, but you just kind of get worn out with all the pain and suffering, and then things start to improve. And we're not quite to that point yet, you know, where she was as painful as it was before surgery. She was still better off there than she is right now, even though that will change.
Ouch.
Yeah. So it's a lot of pain and, you know, restricted mobility. She can't do a lot. Sarah's very independent, so she hates having to ask me to get her something or whatever. She just hates that. And
that's probably good for her. Probably good for you.
Yeah. Well, that's why God did it to her, you know, because we needed to be changed.
Isn't it weird we need to find someone to there's the culprit?
We seem to.
Like, we still got hurricanes lined up like planes at LAX that are keep coming towards the eastern seaboard.
Florida specifically, yeah.
Yeah, and you're just going like, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess over there.
And I got some prophet guys in July said, oh, you know, Florida's going to surge. And I'm going like...
Who said? Oh, prophet guy? It surged, all right.
And I was just going like...
Jeez.
You know, Well, someone else was sort of replaying that, and I'm sitting there going like, are you excited that they kind of tapped into something vague and general? Because, yeah, there's surge, but I'm pretty sure it didn't mean what you're trying to spiritualize it to mean. And
that's true.
If you had a few more details back in July, that might have helped them. I sat there scratching my head going like, are we somehow supposed to perceive that, you know, God's hurling hurricanes at Florida, uniquely Florida, and as if the other, you know, people that are in the way, they don't count in that word, and somehow this is all meant to speak of spiritual breakthrough. And I just like, because they're talking about, you know, Irma and the warrior women, and I'm just going like, okay, I am not on that page.
So now they're so the idea of the prophecy was it'd be the spiritual surge.
Yeah,
we've had two hurricanes devastate these people. And so now we're just going to say, oh, well, it's a spiritual because the women named.
Well, no, I haven't heard them reconcile. I just got wind of, and I sat there going like, okay, I don't think this is the kind of prophetic I see in the scripture that has a sense of clarity with what is being asked and demanded and transacted and why, and you
or helping like, people deal with that.
Yeah,
before? Yeah.
I just end up going like, okay. I bet you heard something because it seems connected. But the interpretation of all this stuff, I'm like, this is where we're groping in the dark and not really hearing well.
You're so much more generous than I. You would actually think they're hearing something. I would go, you know, we had that prophecy that was a big deal in Charisma Journal, first of the year, 2017. Year breakthroughs, whatever. I don't know if this is tied up. Florida was one of those things that was mentioned. And we're going to talk about this prophecy sometime because I know you know a lot of these people and I don't. So I'm not restrained by my relationships with these people who do this.
No, there's context. Yeah, I have context.
But we never did get to it. And until July, I thought, you know, it'd be great to do this now. And then I had a better idea. It would be great to do this January 2018 and look back and say, Okay, did these things happen? It's like the football pregame shows. They talk about the way it's going to work and the quarterback this and the team.
Now you're actually giving a fair analogy.
Now they're completely wrong. At the end of the day, they're going, okay, the pre-shows are absolutely worthless because it's easy to speculate. It's easy. Even Paul warns us about that. Don't give in to speculation.
Speculation.
And where does what we call prophecy and the prophetic movement just become speculation? And then who's ever accountable when it's not true? That's what.
Or are we going to stone him? What are we going to do? I mean, what does it do to make him accountable? You're wrong, you dirty, rotten encourager.
No, I don't think it would be that. I think people would remember when someone said, as they did with Y2K, a fairly well-known author guy said, "I'll stake my entire ministry on the fact that Y2K will usher in a worldwide economic depression that will bring in the second coming and all that eschatological crud." Nothing happened. All right. Stake my entire ministry on nothing. He never addresses it again.
Of course.
He just goes right on. And no one among his listeners, even those who sold their homes and moved to this common commune place to be together.
Oh, that's scary. Wait a minute.
And filled their garage. And when it didn't happen, he moves out of the commune. Because he was renting. Right. I don't know if he was renting. I'm kidding. But the other folks had moved in permanently.
Terrible.
Well, it's just there's no ability for people to go back and say, okay, dude, you were wrong.
No, I know.
And you staked everything on it.
I think that's one of the goofy things going like, wait a minute, you ought to look at, for your own sake, your batting average, to go, what in the heck are you saying? Why are you saying it? And what's the fruit of it?
No, and I'd rather say, why are we listening to it? That's what I want to say. Why do people listen to it? Why does Charisma throw it on their cover? Why do people buy it?
Because it gives people that momentary, I'm groping, reaching in the dark for some hope. I think that's why.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but it doesn't work. And I think that's why people then get jaded about Christianity and about God. And is he really real? Because these guys...
I don't know that I would that's a rather large brush you just painted with.
I know people, though, who just get really tired of the praying to a God you believe in when God doesn't seem to fix the things you're praying about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I got to think. This is a good point, because people mean well. This is not... Don't go back to my Facebook page and look who said this, but almost everybody after Sarah's surgery, praying for a speedy recovery. Okay? Now,
right.
I get that. It's a nice thing to say, but does Sarah recover any faster from her surgery than someone who doesn't have all those prayers for a speedy recovery coming at her?
We don't know yet.
Well, so far, no.
I get where you're going.
I mean, I'm grateful there's no complications. I think the human body is amazing at its ability to be traumatized.
They're verbalizing their hopes.
I get that.
It's like, hey, have a nice day. I honestly don't think...
If that's all it is, that's fine. But people who actually look and say, okay, now, do people who get that praying for your speedy recovery actually get better faster than people who don't?
Pause for a sec. I don't know that speedy...
I don't have a pause.
...is the best recovery. I think full recovery, and that takes time.
It does.
I mean, you kind of like, our microwave generation that wants its answer and answer now, I just end up going like, God's almost always doing the long game. And none of us have the patience to see and understand an awful lot of that. And I'm going like, but that's how he works. It's like there's no instant fix. There's no, I mean, it's like if I want real change that's meaningful, enduring, and it's in my foundations, all of that takes work, takes time.
Yeah.
And so,
and it's, I mean, I would, and I don't want anybody to, I will never have anybody post on my Facebook page again.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Careful now, you're about to be discussed.
I mean, I know people mean well. I know it's just the thing to say. Kind of like when someone's dead. Well,
they don't know in a better place. They don't know what else to say.
Well, you could say things like, man, I'm just praying with you that God will be with you through this time. I know it's lonely. Hey, if I come over and visit you, let me know. There's things
but now
people
you're going too
actually do.
Now you're going too far.
I realize some of these are across country, so all they can do is hope for a speedy recovery. But even then...
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I would think if people paused a minute and thought about, man, what could I say to Sarah if you've ever been in a place of pain 2 or 3 days, what can I say to her that might encourage her today? I think that would be valuable. I'm looking for that every day because I live here, and I'm trying to encourage. I'm head cheerleader number one, so I'm doing all I can to rah, babe. We're going to get through this, and you'll be fine.
But you have to have hurt and found God in the midst of that hurting and that enduring and all that other stuff to be able to not offer more than just little mere well-wishings. And I
well, some of these people they have hurt.
I know. I don't think we don't have good language of suffering. None of this is easy.
I think it's easy. I think it's an easy thing to say, praying for speedy recovery. And I don't mean they don't mean well. I'm not even saying that. I'm not even fighting their motives. But it just seems to me if we're going to figure out how God does what he does and cooperate with it, then our prayers would be different than just our best hopes.
But I think in all honesty, I don't think the bulk of Christendom is really connected in a dialogue with God on what's going on. I mean, you think of all the stuff that's said about what's going on in the world today.
Yeah.
It's from everywhere. And I'm going it's not possible for everybody to be correct in this.
No,
because they're contradictory.
No, it's not.
And you just go wow. And we use that sense that God said. I'm going you know what? I rarely have that God said. I have it occurred to me. I'm thinking, I'm perceiving.
It seems to me this might be true.
Yeah. It's I sort of feel like there's so much grasping to some degree until there really is. There's moments where God really does speak with profound clarity. And I'm going well, now that one's different. That one has that ring of, whoa, I didn't know that. And wow, is that helpful and clear? And I just wish that we had the willingness or almost like the diligence to kind of go let's be honest about that. Let's not use any of that flippantly. If he did say, how did he say? And how do you know? Is there anything testable? Because
and if it doesn't come to pass, can you back up and say, this is where I may have got it wrong, or this is where you know, because as Paul says, any prophecy is looking through a glass darkly. So it's not with this, thus saith the Lord, tick, 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 here's all the things that's going to happen. And then when they don't happen, we turn around and stone you. That's the way it was in the Old Testament. I mean, you had to be right on every detail. And now it's a bit different. I mean, as Paul says, we don't see things clearly. We don't. We see things like through a fog, through a mist, and we're trying to discern. And if there was humility behind all that, it would be such a different reality and a way to share it.
Yeah, I just think, when you have ministries who are trying to make their mortgage payments and all that other stuff, honestly, it is the money side of all of this that makes it a mess.
Boy, that's a big jump from what I'm kidding.
No, but
I hear you.
It is.
I know.
That's why they don't stop and say, hey, this month we got these 4 things wrong, and here's what we're thinking, is what we can learn from that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be great, don't you think? But I don't know that the love offerings would keep coming quite like they thought.
What? Yeah,
They might even actually come more, to be honest.
They might, but maybe not. Let's be serious. People want you to be perfect, and when you're not, I might
easily crucified.
And they want you to be right. And then we got Kirk Cameron, who decided
easy now.
Oh, he thought he would speak out on the hurricane.
I know, but easy now.
Easy what? I'm just saying.
I know him.
I know you do. I can't help that.
Okay.
Your friendships are not my responsibility. You have not introduced me to any of them. So why do I care?
Nice.
No, I'm kidding. No, we got an email actually from Julie, and she said, I heard something yesterday from a well-known Christian celebrity. So she was gracious enough not to use names. He just sent a personal email to me. I did the research. Who is talking about what? She said, concerned my heart. I know from where he's coming, as I grew up under that same teaching, and I believe many of the things he said. What hurt my heart was when he stated that God was sending these storms as a way to punish us, referring to the hurricanes in Texas and Florida. He used Job as his reference. How on earth does saying to someone who lost their home and everything that God did this to show them his love, to show us the love of the Father? I truly believe that God uses what was meant for evil and can make it good. I'm so concerned with the number of people who are stating that these storms are God's doing to wake us up. Perhaps it will wake us up to him. And I believe in Texas, which I live in South Texas and have family and friends that are impacted by Harvey. Harvey brought out the good in people in every race. My heart just aches when I hear people saying God is behind it. How does a person who doesn't know the Father, as I do understand that, or even want to know him, What do we say to people who blame God for these storms? I know he can stop them and move them. He's God Almighty. I've learned to trust him in every storm and know he will navigate me through whatever comes. So should I struggle with the language? I guess what Kirk Cameron tweeted out at some point, a video recorded at the Orlando airport, he said, when God puts his power on display, it's never without reason. There's a purpose, and we may not always understand what that purpose is, but we know it's not random, and we know that weather is sent to cause us to respond to God in humility, awe, and repentance. How do we know that? Do you know that?
Well, I'll say this. I think that the created order has been subjected to futility because of sin. I mean, it talks in Romans how creation is groaning, and it has been subjected to futility. It's like I look at all of the earthquakes, the fires. I mean, the whole West Coast on fire. I mean, it's like
that's not weather, but
lightning. A lot of it gets started by that. True. So I mean, you look at stuff and you go like, our planet reflects that it is not living in peace and harmony with the created order of the beginning of the garden.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you can look at that and go like, okay, wow, this might be a moment to cause and pause. But to ascribe that one-off directedness, like God's up there, right down Hurricane Alley, bowling for Florida, I think that's a little off.
A little?
I think it's a little off
okay,
because it's off. Like, but are there judgments? I mean, when you look through the Bible, there's moments where there are decrees of things that happen. Then there's also moments in the Bible where the question was asked to Jesus, well, who sinned? The tower fell, and it's like, there is no direct one-to-one correlation in that moment. And so
there is language in the Psalms about God hurling lightning bolts or God, whatever. Do we look back at that saying, yeah, God actually does that? That's what's going on? Or that's how a more superstitious society saw those things? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, seeing it that way, honestly, makes me feel like it's a little dismissed, like, well, no, they kind of got that wrong. I'm a little hesitant to draw that. I do think that God, like Sodom and Gomorrah, seems to be one that's sort of directed and was announced and negotiated about.
It wasn't a hurricane.
And we didn't find 10. And so you just go like, you know what? There are real acts of judgment there that I don't feel uncomfortable going like, okay, that's something that I need to try to I need to understand that that's a reality. Do I understand every aspect of it? No, I don't. Do I see that happening in a ton right now? Like, well, that's what the hurricane is? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think to me that's the point. There are moments in Scripture where God does use these things to accomplish his purposes. Uh-huh. But then to say every time these things happen, it's God accomplishing his purposes.
See, that's where I think people are applying a principle they think is there without the intimacy of knowing.
Especially when you're wealthy enough to crawl on your private jet and fly out of Orlando as it's approaching.
As you say, your
take a shot
video
at
takeaway,
the judgment and punishment of God on the rest of it.
Yeah, that doesn't come with as much power.
Well, Pat Robertson did it with Katrina. This was punishment for the gay community in New Orleans, his language, and that gets debunked. But it over the long haul, it seems like we so need to put God behind everything, particularly if we've got a political agenda where we feel like the world's moving away from the morality we want. Then when something like that comes, we can talk about, see, God's getting you back for not doing what he wants you to do. And it keeps happening. Instead of God, and I like what Julie pointed to, the compassion and love of people that got out on the street and helped people get out of their flooded homes and do whatever they needed to do to survive, and how a community shares its resources at a time like that. It's not about what's mine, what's yours. It's how do we help each other. I think that's the beautiful part of those things. But to say that it's an act of punishment by God because we don't have the right political policies.
We don't have enough specificity, enough advanced declaration of it, enough context that says, because I don't think God comes in judgment without first coming with a sense of warning and here's the remedy. You can do, it's like, I'm going to do this. If you guys don't respond, here's the outcome. I sort of feel like the after the fact prophets of judgment, I'm like, you're not very helpful, because if that's true, why were you not on the front end negotiating, interceding and warning with clarity as to here are the issues that God has, and here's what we need to do. And if we fail to respond, here are the things we will face. Now, if anyone had done that with some real clarity and a broken-hearted reality that displayed God's heart for us,
right,
and then those exact things came to pass, they'd have my attention in spades.
right.
But nobody, and I'm just going like.
But have you ever seen that? What you just described, I mean, you're talking a lot of the Jonah kind of. This
but Jonah didn't even say you get to repent. He's just hoping they weren't.
Right, but he was very specific. They did repent, so it didn't happen.
He gave them a time frame,
yeah.
And he gave them the declaration that judgment's coming.
Yeah.
They decided on their own, we're going to take this dude seriously, and we're going to repent. And God didn't do all that stuff, and then Jonah was pissed.
But in your lifetime, have you ever seen that kind, what you just described about specificity, time and location? Here's the method. Here's why. Here's how to get out of it. Here's the remedy. I've never seen that in my lifetime. It's always been after the fact.
I have had a couple of friends that have prophesied earthquakes and dated, and it has happened.
Okay, I've heard some of those stories. I don't know the same people.
Yeah. I went and saw one of the dudes
a week
ago.
I did saw that. Another friend you've never introduced me to. But that's besides
it's not mine to do.
But some of that, honestly, and I'm not speaking about this person in particular because I don't know that to be true, but other cases where it's kind of retrofitted back to a story. It didn't happen as clearly.
No, I think there's too much reverse engineering trying to, this means that, and you just go like, you know what? This would have a whole lot more weight and authority if you had the clarity ahead of time that would be plain for all to recognize.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard anybody say, LA's going to have an earthquake at 2:32 on X amount of date, and it happened. But afterwards, it's like, God told me it's going to happen at 2:32. Well, really? Okay, I'm impressed. Thank you. Especially when your life in so many other ways.
People could always say
especially when your life in so many other ways doesn't reflect a life that's learning to yield to the love of the Father and the humility of his heart.
See, I think that the prophetic, as opposed to little names and dates and trivia, and especially the I'm angry and here's the judgment thing, there is so much of the heart of God that I believe the church is meant to reflect. And there's a profound aspect of it. We're meant to have that heart. We're meant to be that people. That's not meant to be just a few one-off dudes. I mean, it really isn't. I sort of feel like we're called to be a prophetic people, all of us. But I just think it's been trivialized into this little palm reader thing. You just go like, come on.
And I think what Julie is saying is that's true. I think what actually happens in Florida and in Texas when the hurricane hits and people are being devastated and people out there rescuing, loving, caring, providing resources, money being given. I know a doctor that went with us to Israel who went down to do a week's worth of medical stuff for free down in the Houston area after the earthquake. I think that is happening. I think prophetic people who are responding out of love and compassion for people who are caught in times of tragedy. I do think that goes on in hundreds of thousands of ways. And then one or two people get a microphone in front of their face or their Twitter account or whatever and say something that just undermines who God is in all of this.
Yeah.
Because it's a very few people who are willing to get up and say, oh, hey, God's doing this. It's to punish America for being wrong on gay marriage or whatever. He didn't make that particular connection, but we did at Katrina, or some did at Katrina. I just think it offends people's sensibility about what the gospel is really all about.
Well, it's like throwing a dirt clod into a pool. It's like, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it doesn't provide meaningful clarity or a sense of action.
Yeah.
It's like, when God really has spoken on issue in my life, there's specificity. I'm not wondering. I'm not like, well, gee, what do I do? Just I'm in the corner in a timeout. No, there's specificity of conscience where it's like there is real clarity of conviction. That was wrong. You need to do this.
Yeah.
Now, that's helpful.
And there's also the circumstances bear it out.
Yeah.
When there's clarity and God speaks, and now the circumstances actually unfold the way that you sensed that it was going to happen. I mean, I think that's really honest and genuine and wonderful. But when people are doing it after the fact on big ticket items,
yeah, it seems to be more leave the realm of condemnation, where you're just going to feel like, oh, like, what do you say to the faithful person in the midst of all that to whom none of that's true? They just had their house wiped out, and the surge, which was oceans of water, not prophetic power. Right. You just end up go like, okay, what that one irritated me. Okay, I
hear you.
I just go like,
we have different things.
We're not helping.
No, we're not.
When we're doing that, and it may be well intended, but we're still kind of living afar off and not climbing into a place of greater clarity. And hold your tongue until you have that.
And I would say, I think most of our disasters, like the hurricanes coming up, Hurricane Alley, or earthquakes in California, I mean, these things are just, like you said, part of the world just in this whole out of sync with the nature of the Creator. It's not necessarily punishment for sin. It's just out of sync with that. Now, can God use some of those things to a higher purpose? Well, of course he can. Is he not going to try and work good out of every one of them? Of course he will. But I like your analogy. God's not bowling hurricanes at Florida, even though it looks like it right now when you look at the weather pattern. But that's a normal weather pattern made worse by the climate issues that we're facing as a world.
And it's not as if Jesus didn't say that as we move towards the end of all this, there's going to be an intensity and a greater frequency of all this stuff coming unglued. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken. I mean, that's not on most refrigerators. But that is the culmination of the age. And when you look at this, I'm going like, okay, we need to just sort of recognize there's a measure of this that's coming with great. I mean, it's wild when you go like, these are like 500-year events and never before this. And you just go like, okay, wow, that does get my attention.
Yeah, it does me too.
You know, you look at the eclipse and I'm going like, I'm looking at it like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm not hearing direct, Brad, I'm speaking this. It's like, Lord, is that a good thing, bad thing? It's like, it's a little weird that 7 years from now, there's another one. And I'm just like, okay, that is not normal.
Well, it is. They can predict it for the next 1,000 years.
I know, but to cross over Urbandale, Illinois, in 7 years, you end up going, that's interesting. I don't know what all of it means. I mean, like, honestly, take the eclipse for a sec. I went, wow, what's so amazing about this is this kind of eclipse where it only crosses over one country and one only. The last time it happened in history was 1776. That's an interesting date as it relates to this particular nation. This is the only nation in which those two things happen. And I kind of went, okay, I do not know what that means, but that does intrigue me.
Right. It can be intriguing, but doesn't have to mean anything. Could it just be a coincidence of activity?
I have my own little holy hunch, which is not a direct statement from him.
Okay.
That I do think that, gosh, it certainly tractor beamed my attention. The fact that there were 7 cities throughout all the state's path of totality that were named Salem. I kind of went, now that's interesting. I mean, it's just interesting. Now, I can turn that into something that I think God is saying that is an encouragement to me. But I didn't get that before the eclipse. I got that in the sense of the aftermath of, God is able to keep those in perfect peace whose minds is stayed upon him. That moon has to be in perfect alignment with the sun in the path of totality, where it's like, wow, we don't live there. If we're like the moon and we're a sense of reflected glory, we don't live in that kind of intimacy of direct related and attentive focus on God that would do that. And I'm going like, And then you have all these storms afterwards. I'm going like, I don't know. For me, I'm going like, hey, God, let's hang out a little closer. Let's walk a little. I want to be able to be a little more storm-proof because I am a lot more connected and focused on you as opposed to distracted.
And that can be the fruit of something, not necessarily its cause, right?
Yeah, I'm not giving causality. I just think when you look at all this stuff, I go like, wow, there's an awful lot going on. It does cause me to draw near to him in reflective conversation.
Well, anything that does that is valuable, obviously.
Yeah.
Surgery in a hospital or whatever, anything that causes us to draw near to him. But I don't know that there's something specifically meaningful in the fact that we have certain weather patterns or even eclipse patterns that, I mean, I looked at a map for the next 200 years where all those, eclipses are going to show up. And it's pretty amazing. And the way they hook, some of them just do a little hook thing instead of a long straight line. But it's all mathematically determined by the day of creation, I guess, way back at the beginning, when all that would happen.
I think I didn't get into all the blood moon stuff.
Don't get me started.
No, I know, but I looked at that and went, okay, that's interesting. I don't dismiss it, but I don't know that I don't know that the clarity of declaration that's coming out of it, I'm going like, I don't know. I don't know what I think about that, but it is intriguing. I don't want to be someone that dismisses those, because I do think that the heavens declare the glory of God. And I'm going like, okay, I think there are things to be seen and heard in the unfoldings of nature. But before you stand up on your plane and declare that this is the judgment of God, I'm hoping you actually heard with clarity the dynamics that might be helpful to say something like that. Because if you haven't, you might sit on that and pray a little more.
The problem is, I think people who say stuff like think they have that, think they do. God has made that clear. And so they are sharing it. And
I know when I challenge them, they realize they haven't.
Yeah? Have you talked to him? No.
Not on that issue.
Okay.
I will.
You will?
Yeah, because that's the kind of stuff that I end up going like, that undermines so much of everything else that is going on, because you know what? You just gave everyone a big old slap in the face in the name of God, and I'm not sure you had the wisdom, the clarity, and the right to do that.
Well, I'm pretty sure they didn't. And I'm sure it's a very faulty. You take a few scriptures from the Old Testament and then extrapolate that to every storm and wind and lightning bolt is centered by God exactly as he desires.
They don't actually line up all to say the same thing where you can do that. I mean, that's
Christians
the difficulty.
Want to believe that. There's a reason why when he says something like that, people respond to it. People like to know that, boy, we're not the victim of the capriciousness of the weather. That if God's going to roll a bowling ball at Florida, he's being the one to do it. And you can say that if you're in Michigan or California or wherever else you are in the world. If you're in Florida or Houston,
they always prophesy that we're going to be, subject to these massive earthquakes and fall off, and I'm like, oh, great. And usually it's my friends on the East Coast that are prophesying those things. I'm like, fine, well, I'm going to prophesy some hurricanes to you.
And one day we will. One day California is probably, barring the second coming, is going to experience, they're saying the big one is on its way. It's overdue, but it could be another 250 years from now. It's just people prophesy. And whenever it happens, see, this was prophesied back in 1997 by so-and-so. And so eventually you're going to prophesy a big hurricane is going to hit Texas.
Torture the data, it will confess to anything.
I could do that right now. I can profess, in the next,
careful now. Careful.
Hurricane
You'll get to give account for every thought, word, and deed.
Yeah, I'm not saying it seriously is the difference. I do. I appreciate Julie's note. I appreciate people who, when they hear someone they respect say something like that, and then they try to work their head around it and heart, and then they can't. I just go, man, it just seems so unlike God. I love that. I love when people can not just say, well, so-and-so said it, so it must be true.
I mean, I look at what's going on, and we have an awful lot of discontent, and there's quite a bit of a mess going on in our country. And I do think it is a time for real reflection to go like, my gosh, Lord, where are we in all this? And what would you have me to do to be of helpful assistance to what you might want to do in this country? Is there the opportunity for lots of repentance? Yes, I really believe that. I mean, it's kind of bizarre to me that we have a lot of things going on in the church where it's like somehow we're uncomfortable with this, that, and the other. Culture's changed, so now we got to sort of change the lines. And I'm going like, I don't think that's the answer.
Changing the lines?
we kind of change our boundaries of truth. We kind of keep moving the standards. We want to say, well, no, we got that wrong, and it doesn't really mean
Christianity,
that.
you mean, or the country as a whole?
I think both. I mean, I think secular culture is kind of doing this too. It's their social mores have changed and gravitated. Now it's sort of like we just got to get with the times. And I'm going like, I don't see that as helpful to us.
Do you see anything that we've progressed in as a culture that would say, in some ways, culture's having a more healthy view of God in the world, or not? Do you see it all as negative?
No, I do think that there's been enough nice impetus that I think there's the idea there's a friendly God out there. We have certain segments of society that just rage against the reality of God. And I don't really know what to do with that, because I'm going like, there's not a lot of agreement I have there.
But that's still a small minority that rage against God.
Yeah.
Or the idea of God.
They have with wonderful strategy found themselves into places of real public
but haven't they
influence?
Hasn't a lot of that rage come from feeling like they've been oppressed by those who claim to follow God?
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
So the reaction against God is really the reaction against the oppression that they felt. Because I look at, in sexual issues, we get to the Nashville statement, but we're not going to have near enough time to do that right now. But, we can get to statements like that where we say, really, in matters of sexuality, our nation is less in agreement now than it was 50 years ago.
Yes.
For sure. But in areas of, say, human rights and the dignity of an individual and protecting that dignity of an individual, I think we're light years beyond where we were 50 years ago. Light years. So, I mean, it's both. There's some things that society really is getting better at, and there's other things where society is maybe not getting better at in terms of how we would view it from a Christian perspective, but from a sense of, how we treat each other, even if we see things differently. That's a different story.
I know, but our civil discourse, if I felt like the kindness and the compassion of understanding the predicament that people can find themselves in and treating them with dignity and value, if I thought that was being reflected in our normal cultural discourse, I would think that's awesome. But that has absolutely gotten a lot more vicious, a lot more polarized, where we don't have a lot of civil discourse happening in our culture, that I'm going like, okay, wow, I wish those two things better reflected some kind of harmony, because then I could kind of like, okay, I get where this is headed, but I don't see people in moving standards of truth are necessarily always conferring value and dignity on the people with whom they disagree.
Well, it started that way, I think.
Maybe.
Some of the dialogue, it was an appeal to, if we take gay marriage, for instance, where that's part of what we're talking around. Could we just have domestic partnerships so that if my partner is in a hospital, I can go visit them and help make decisions about their health care, because we do have a commitment to each other that's very much like you and Sarah
Those are legitimate issues that I think the state has, in a weird way, gotten itself involved in unhelpful ways when you come up to that particular situation.
Yeah, and I think they did ask for more of a civil discourse. Can we at least have the freedom to do this, or derive the medical benefits, or whatever? And the response was no, you can't. It's immoral, you're deviant, and the name calling, a lot came from the Christian community. It didn't come from them initially. It didn't come from people who felt oppressed by our laws because they reflected a certain theological doctrine. I mean, I believe certain things are wrong, not because I necessarily think they're harmful. I just think God said they are. So I may not be able to say why they are, or that I necessarily like that it is. But if God says it, then I'm really one that wants to live in God's ways. So I'm aimed that way. But if I didn't believe in God, I don't know that I would believe in all the rules I believe in, or the free, or the
no. And I don't
morality.
I don't know that you really can impose and declare that everyone just abides by that, because I'm like, if they don't even believe in God, I'm pretty sure I've got little to no ground to appeal to them. But God said, and they don't believe in that.
Until you believe the God I know,
you're
not going to care about his ways necessarily.
But what we do have in our culture, and I don't think any of this is probably helpful to paint with a big brush, It's as if the people that were formerly bullied can become some of the worst of bulliers. I get it. I get it. But it's not helpful.
No, I get it's not helpful. But it's understandable. I think that part's true.
But
if people on the other side of the issue would have been helpful to them when they wanted help.
Well, yeah, we might not be in this escalation.
Yeah.
But the problem is somewhere you got to sort of put a pin in it and let this de-escalate, because we really are. It's like our media is fomenting this into a constant chaos where I'm going like, gosh, you just turn that off and it feels more peaceful.
Yeah, unfortunately. We can't fix it from here.
Thank you for travelling with us today on The God Journey. You can join this conversation by visiting thegodjourney.com.